how I notate that, it's really important. And like, I made a mistake once, and it was not good. It was not good.
Hello and welcome to the Keyboard Chronicles, a podcast for keyboard players. I'm your host, David Holloway, and I'm thrilled as always to be here with you. And my brother-in-arms, Mr. Paul Bindig's here with me. How are you, sir?
I'm going really good, David. How are you going?
Yeah, look, on a bit of a high after talking to Mr. Peter Smith. Once again, we've had a wonderful guest with a very broad and diverse career.
Yeah, absolutely. That whole being a real jazz guy, but then that move into being a assistant MD, associate MD on singing competition TV shows, which is a pretty interesting world in itself. And he's obviously played with some great artists, and he's almost like a bit of a, I don't know if he can sing or not, but he did give us a couple of Sinatra notes in there. So I wonder if he's a triple threat. He's an accomplished actor as well, David.
Yes, I think he can do all three, lucky bugger. So I look forward to seeing him on Glee. Not the Glee, I assume, doesn't exist anymore. So, yeah, no, I think you'll enjoy this interview with Peter a lot. So we'll jump into it and then we'll talk to you after the show. That'll do. Peter, thank you so much for joining us on this, well, what for you is a relatively wintry Monday night. Much appreciated.
Yes, thanks for having me, guys.
So I thought we'd kick off just with how your 2024 into 2025 has been. You're a busy guy, but just tell us about what your last year's been like.
Well, you're kind of looking at it. I lucked into this amazing space in Pasadena, California, which is, part of Los Angeles. This is a sort of a 1,000 square foot room in a church, and it's my studio.
Wow.
So I'm originally from New York and, living in LA since 2005. I guess it was like the summer of 2023. I was in New York. I was playing some shows and kind of, I always get energized when I go to New York. And I came back and I thought to myself, oh my goodness, I have this space. Like, I've been recording and rehearsing and doing all sorts of things in here. But, the church has endless folding chairs. I should do concerts. So I started this concert series, and we're actually doing like volume 12 next Sunday.
Wow.
It's pretty much always on Sunday. And I kind of took a page out of, are you familiar with this really great young jazz pianist out of New York named Emmett Cohen?
Yes.
Yeah. So Emmett started this thing in the pandemic, live at Emmett's place in his tiny Harlem apartment. So I kind of took a page out of his book, and I thought, well, I can fit about 40 people folding chairs, and why don't I see about it's a studio. So I have all the microphones and I'll just set them all up and I'll get a buddy to help me and then we'll stream it, and
Brilliant.
So that's what we've been doing. And we've made a lot of mistakes, but now we're kind of dialed in.
That's brilliant. And how's the response been, Peter? It's been good response?
It's been really good. What's so interesting, you guys are music guys, you'll go to a club, right? And even if you're hearing acoustic music, whether it's folk or jazz or whatever, you're hearing speakers, even in these small spaces. And, sometimes if there's a really good sound person, if the equipment's good, it can be a lovely experience. But I feel like we've lost a little bit, and I don't know, maybe this isn't true in, where you guys are, but, in the States for sure, lost a little bit of this sense of what acoustic music really sounds like. And people don't, what I'm giving them here, because there's a tiny little bass amp, you can see it right there. So the upright player, but some guys don't even plug in. If there's a vocalist, I give her a microphone and a little help. And their microphone's streaming, everything, capturing it. But otherwise, it's an acoustic. So I think the intimacy of that for people, and also to get in here, you got to it's fun because it's there's all these weird staircases and you got to feels like you need a secret password or something. So it kind of contributes to the whole experience. So people are really digging it,
Do you find, Peter, that the audience responds differently to the immediacy of that kind of setup? Maybe it's almost visceral to them because you're feeling the actual vibrations of the instruments and that setting?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right about that. And also the vibrations of actually the acoustic sounds. The fact that we can play so quietly and be really bombastic too, and they're just right there for all of it. And then also just the intimacy of the environment. While it is a large room, they're pretty close. It's like they're right up against us. And there are small jazz clubs that are like that. And I feel like the jazz clubs, the way things were set up in in the 50s and 60s probably was similar to this. But gosh, I remember hearing Jackie McLean when he was still alive at the Village Vanguard when I was still living in New York. And the Vanguard, which is hallowed ground for jazz. And, I think it was like a quintet or sextet, and there's Jackie and trumpet player and maybe another tenor, I think there was a tenor player too. And they're all like playing into microphones and coming through the speakers at the Vanguard. And they're horn players.
Yeah.
It was like, who made that decision? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And so if that's happening, well, okay, then you got to mic the piano and turn that up, and you got to do. It's like it becomes this game and then suddenly I'm listening to a not very well mixed recording almost. You know what I mean? It's weird.
And how, Peter, do you apply that? Obviously, you've released a couple of albums as a solo artist in your own right. I mean, how do you apply that sort of knowledge to the way you record and release your own work?
Well, I mean, the trio record that I did, I guess it came out a couple of years ago now. We did that all in one room in one of the great studios here in LA, United Studios. And it was kind of crazy because this engineer buddy of mine, Eric Goebel and Karma Auger, we did a Dolby Atmos recording. So it's like a piano trio record. But what they did was, it was pretty innovative. There was actually an article written about it in Mix magazine. So they set up 40 microphones, 40, for a piano trio. So what they did is, they've become sort of experts in the, what is it, like the Dolby Atmos space, because it's 360, right? So they tried to put microphones into all of those spots that are available to them for mixing. And I think when they got into mixing, like, it didn't necessarily go the way they had pre-thought when they were recording. They just made choices that were musical to them. But a lot of it, I think, was set up that way. So the idea of we're going to play better as a trio if we're all in one room. I mean, if I'm, I had headphones on when I was recording at United, but I was feeling their energy, and I think I might have had one ear off, and there's a lot of value from the mixing standpoint of recording an album with everybody isolated. And I'm playing along with you, but the reason I'm able to do that is because I'm wearing headphones, because I wouldn't be able to hear you in your booth over there. But I wonder, having done that many times, probably successfully sometimes, it's still just, it's so unnatural. And it's so, I often come out of sessions like that wondering, like, well, I mean, I guess it sounded okay, but what could it have been if we had actually been playing and really with each other? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that, again, it may be what you may lose in the ability to isolate every mic and mic leak and that sort of thing. You're gaining in the immediacy and the ability to bounce off each other, and the snap, crackle, and pop and sizzle that you have when you're hot, when you're working well together. Just a question, Peter, and we'll come back to what equipment you use, but I'm interested for that particular recording. What piano were you working with?
Oh, it was a 9-foot Steinway, and in fact, it was a Steinway from the Los Angeles Motown studios that ended up at United at some point. And it's funny because I almost didn't check out United, because I checked out Capitol and East West, which is the old Ocean Way studio, and someone had told me, United, don't bother, their piano's beat up, it's not good. And I went and checked it out, and I was like, whoa, this is great. Actually, my friend Jordan Siegel, who's also a really great film composer, he had recorded his album there, and he said, luckily I talked to him before I made the decision. He's like, no, man, check out United. You might like it.
Yeah, right. Cool.
And I did. And the room is just so, it could be quite daunting or it could be inspiring. I was trying to feel it in an inspiring way. But, you go in the hallway and it's like Nat King Cole and Frank Sinatra. And like, it's just walls of, everybody's recorded there and Count Basie, it's just like, but yeah, it was, and then I think it's, oh gosh, I want to say it's a Focusrite board there. I mean, you can look it up on the internet, I'm sure, but an old one and like, amazing. And the mic locker was just ridiculous. All the classic Neumanns, the 67s, 47s, there were old ribbons, there were Telefunkens, and, just like Karma used all of them.
Yeah, all 40 of them scattered around.
Exactly. It's like every cool microphone in that place was up and running and capturing something.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it must have really given you a sense of being, you're etching your own little piece of history amongst all those great artists who recorded in that studio. And speaking of history, we'd love to now rewind a little bit. Yeah. And go back to your formative years as a musician. So as a very young person,
yes.
Tell us about your musical upbringing. What got you interested in music and how did that look for you as you were growing up?
Yeah, well, I was very fortunate to be born into a musical family. My mother was a brilliant singer, a guitarist. She played piano as well. In fact, she went to Wellesley. And my mom died in 2020 and it was her birthday in December. And I connected with her best friend who went to college with her in Wellesley. And she was recounting stories of, my mom used to play in the coffee houses in 1959, 1960, in that area. And apparently Joan Baez was also doing this. And my mom's friend said, "Oh, your mom was much better than her." Seriously, she said that. And, as a kid, as the son of someone, it's like, wow, the things you find out about your parents. Joe Baez is pretty great. So I guess my mom was too. So anyway, so I'm born into a musical family with parents who always encouraged me in the arts, and now having so many colleagues in the arts and hearing so many stories from their upbringing of, oh, well, that's fine, kid, but, you're going to do something real, right? You're going to get a real job at some point, not encouraging. And my parents were like, oh, no, this is a noble pursuit. Yeah. And, they could have taught me a little more about finances, probably. That would have been helpful, but they were good. They were good along the artistic line. Yeah. So there was a piano in the house. I was playing it as a 4-year-old. And so they were like, well, let's get him lessons. And I started with classical music and I was never a good reader. I would trick my teacher into playing pieces for me. And then I would repeat it by ear.
Wow.
So it's funny because I've had to play a lot of catch up as an adult with my sight reading. Because, as a professional now, I'm in sessions and stuff. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be sweating bullets if somebody throws something in front of me. So, that was sort of my upbringing. And I took a brief pause in my piano lessons, when I was 12 years old, because I got into sports and stuff. And then I resumed it at age 14 as I was entering high school, because I wanted to play stuff that was on the radio, Billy Joel and that sort of, I was like, oh, let me see if I can. So there was a teacher at the music school who would do that. So I was studying with him, and then every now and then he'd slip me Autumn Leaves or, and then I don't know, something happened. And I always grew up with jazz because my father plays vibes. So there was a lot of modern jazz quartet, and there's a Horace Silver record that we used to listen to a lot, Bill Evans. So jazz was part of my upbringing. But then suddenly as a 16-year-old, I no longer knew what was the most popular thing on Top 40, and I was the complete jazz. I just went all in, and I was buying CDs, and kind of blossoming out of that, where, I discovered Bill Evans and then Bill Evans with Miles Davis. And then I was like, oh, let me check out all these other bands. And then, John Coltrane and Red Garland. And then you go later to Herbie. And then I want to get Herbie Hancock's records. And then it kind of, a lot of it grew out for me with Miles Davis, weirdly. He's my kind of forwards and backwards tree of jazz, And then, and then by college, I went to college in the city at Columbia just because I wanted to stay in New York, and I was able to get in. I don't think I could get in now. It's much harder. I got in and didn't really knew I would do music in some fashion, but wasn't really sure. And they didn't have much jazz. They had Phil Schaap at the Columbia radio station, brilliant jazz historian. And I joined the radio station, became a DJ, and I learned a lot from him. But I think they have a good jazz program now. But at the time, there weren't really any instructors. So I continued my classical piano. And then I discovered if a student wanted to study a certain kind of music performance, and Columbia didn't have a teacher for them, like on faculty, you could audition for the conductor of the symphony. And if he deemed you worthy, Columbia would pay for your lessons. So I did that. And he said, okay, yeah, you can play. And so I began a mentorship with Mike LaDon, who's, I hope, well-known jazz pianist with Milt Jackson for like 14 years and Sonny Rollins and Benny Golson and, dozens of records under his own name. So that's where I really learned how to play, was with Mike. I thought I could play, and then I got with him and he was like, said, you're going to play this one note and you're going to make it swing, and then we'll go from there,
Well, I think that's what a good mentor does, right, Peter, is they challenge you and take you to places you never thought you could go yourself, or maybe didn't even know existed. So that would have been an amazing experience. So thinking about your work you've done later in life when it comes to TV work, which I think would be its own unique sort of discipline.
Yeah.
How did you get into that, and what did you learn from your jazz upbringing and your mentorship through college that allows you to deal with that environment, if anything?
Right. Well, it's been an interesting road. Life is so funny because it goes all these unexpected places. So as I think you guys mentioned earlier, I've had these dueling careers, although I'm really primarily a musician at this point. But for a long time, I was just as much pursuing my acting career as I was pursuing my music career. And they would, I'd be involved with one and then something would end. And then my New York musician friends were always very confused when I would go do a play. I'd be like, what happened to you? Were you on the road, or like, because I'd be calling them up like, hey, I need some gigs now. I'm done. They're like, you were in a play? You were playing in the pit? Like, what were you doing? But that said, like, I think the fact that I was involved in that world made me attractive to some people when I moved to LA, just with a familiarity around that industry. And, there's someone in LA, brilliant musician and music director, and just a great human. He's responsible for so much work here for so many. Ricky Minor. He was Whitney Houston's bassist and did American Idol and The Tonight Show and all this. So I think Ricky saw in me, not only a certain musical competency, but just like that I would be cool around like celebrities and stuff, and not, I was used to it because I was in that world a bit. And a lot of that is that's so important. But just generally speaking for musicians, just how are you going to be around people? Like, okay, can you play great? Yeah. Can you bring certain things? But like, what if I have to be on a tour bus with you for 3 weeks? Am I going to lose my mind? Or what if what if we've got this serious, like, famous artist? Like, are you going to be weird around her? And like, that's a big part of whether you get the work or not, So I think that helped me get in these situations where I was associate music director for some of these television singing competition shows like Duets and The Four, and doing other things where I'm, just on set doing musical coaching or and then separate from that, I've been very lucky to, and again, it's just connections and luck, to have, like over 24 of my songs placed in television shows. That's kind of one of the few avenues remaining where musicians can make sort of real money. With Spotify and all that, it's hard to make any money on albums anymore. Satellite radio is still a thing. I don't know how it is in Australia.
Yeah, not so much, sadly. Yeah.
I think the main source of income is hitting the road, or as you said,
right.
having your work be licensed by a film or a TV show or something like that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. I'm still holding out for that like TV show theme. That would be great. But yeah, I mean, it's I've been very lucky along those lines. But even so, like I had a long run of that, and I'm still seeing some of the benefits of those TV placements. But in the last handful of years, it's been less so. So it's like, it's the career of a musician is always like, okay, this is slowing down. So you want to have like 4 things going at once. So if one lessens, you've got another thing you can kind of put the gas pedal on the other thing, and let it take off.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask you one more question about the TV work.
Yeah,
Peter, I imagine the pace you're working at is hectic. Like I imagine it's intense. So I'm really interested in your experience of that and how you dealt with that. If my assumption is correct.
Yes. Well, a couple of things, a couple of stories I think on that. So first, working on some of these singing competition shows. So the role that I've had in that world, and I've done a couple of them. When you're an associate music director, you're basically working with the contestants and sometimes a vocal coach as well. And so it's like, okay, we're going to do, the song has been chosen. It's Goodbye Yellow Brick Road by Elton John, and like, okay, how are we going to do it? We have to cut the bridge and maybe only half of a verse, and then because it can only be 90 seconds or 2 minutes tops, and so you come up with this arrangement, and then that contestant is with my MD. Like I'm the associate MD, so like whether for duets it was John Beasley, for the 4 it was Ricky Minor and then Adam Blackstone. So these contestants are going to be rehearsing with the full band, sometimes that same day, or maybe they're with me like first thing in the morning, the band's, and there's an arranger like writing the chart overnight, So how I notate that, our work, it's really important. And like I made a mistake once, and it was not good. It was not good. So, but you learn from mistakes, right? So yeah, to just be clear and like in a situation like that, you want to always be making the MD like look good and helping his job be easy. So you learn quickly like a lot of lessons along those lines about how to do that.
I imagine too in those singing competition shows you're occasionally working with contestants who might be quite inexperienced in dealing with these sort of situations, not being professional musicians themselves, which would be its own level of challenge, I think.
Yes, that's correct. And so trying to steer somebody to do, reminds me of a story from my acting world. So one of my acting teachers always quoted Mike Nichols, the famous director. And Mike Nichols said, a good director enables an actor to want to do what he must do. So often in this situation you're describing, that's what I was like, how do I get this contestant to want to do the better choice here? Like, I don't think you want to do that, So that's, a lot of it. And someone like Ricky Minor is brilliant at that. I've learned so much just watching him. I mean, Ricky will be in the center of a room with, the musicians and the producers and everything. And he's somehow keeping track of like what everybody needs and how to get the job done through it all. You know what I mean? And it's a very specific and rare skill and so useful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And going from one extreme to the other, Peter, from working with people that may be less experienced through to someone that was incredibly experienced when you worked with her, which was Natalie Cole. Tell us about how that came about and, again, what you learnt from that relationship playing with her.
Well, it was very, very short-lived. I really just had one gig with her.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I was the last pianist she hired. And I mean, it was almost like a tryout thing where I was flown to the Bay Area to play sort of part of a gig with her. There was actually a colleague of mine, John, who had been a long time sub as a pianist in the band. He was playing. I had been sort of hired, given, that I didn't fall flat on my face in this experience. And so I did okay, you know, and I remember going to her dressing room and she's like, Peter, you sounded great. I've heard so many good things. I'm really excited to be working with you. This was like in September of whatever year, the year she died.
2015, yeah.
Yeah. And then, and you know, that week I had all these dates in my calendar, including playing with the San Francisco Symphony, like a big holiday show over Christmas time, you know, and then she just got sick and I never got to do any of it. But that was special. And I mean, it's just nice to be thought of in that world. My friend Josh Nelson, who's a wonderful pianist in LA, spent a lot of time working with her. And I think it was Josh who recommended me, actually. It's really lovely how that works. And it's a little bit different, you know, because I've lived in the acting world as well. You know, the music world, like, we're really looking out for each other in a weird way. I mean, there's competition, and, you know, sometimes you get a hint of, like, when somebody plays something really great and you're like, I wish I could, you know. But mainly it's like we're out here kind of helping each other and support and like, you know, I go hear Josh play and I love it, you know.
That's right.
I want to support him, and I think he feels the same way, you know. So
yeah, no, that's the way it should be.
Yeah.
And Peter, thankfully, a much longer relationship musically has been with Molly Ringwald. So tell us how that came about. And I mean, that's been going for 10 plus years, just how that's developed over time and again, what you get out of that.
Well, I got 2 trips to Australia.
True.
Which was amazing. No, Molly's really a close friend, and she's been very busy acting the last, 4 or 5 years. And hasn't been as active musically. But yeah, we met actually as actors. You know, I was in a play with her. She had no idea I was a jazz pianist. Her father was this amazing sort of traditional jazz pianist. I was blind, really a remarkable guy. So she grew up, in fact, she thought she was going to be a jazz singer. Like as a little girl, she was working with her dad. She thought she was headed towards that as a career as a little girl. Got involved with some acting as a teenager and like kind of got lucky with the Facts of Life and then all the movies, and then suddenly she's Molly Ringwald, you know, and she's, okay, this is what you're doing, I guess. But yeah, so there was a cast party for this play that we were both in, and there was a piano, and Molly didn't even know I played, but like some other people in the cast did, and they were like, oh, Peter, go play, you know. And I started playing, and then Molly, and we'd been friendly, you know, the way you are, but like we weren't close or anything. And I was sort of respectful of her space because, you know, she's a celebrity and all of that.
Yeah.
But when I played the piano, she's like, where have you been? You know, like, how did I not know this about you? And we sort of quickly started, developing plans of working together. And then I moved to Los Angeles, and she was actually sort of upset about that because she was still in New York. And she's like, you're supposed to be my piano player. You can't move. So, but then she followed a couple of years later. She got a TV show, and it was perfect because she was working maybe like one day a week on this show. She was sort of the mom of the main character. And so she had a fair amount of time. So she was over my house. We were working out arrangements, like we got it all going. And then finally in 2013, the album released, and we toured heavily for like 5 or 6 years, and played all kinds of places. And in fact, there's a live album that's pretty much all finished live at Birdland we did a week at Birdland, and she sounds great on it. And I don't know, hopefully people will get to hear it one day.
Yes, I knew that I was going to ask you about when that was coming out. So yeah, I look forward to seeing that whenever it does. And I mean, I think saying you toured heavily is an understatement. I think it was something like 250 shows in 7 countries. That's a big amount of touring.
That's good. I should remember that. I should write that down somewhere. I had no idea that's what it was.
Yeah, so no, that is amazing. And so, I mean, just describe for us Molly's voice. So obviously, like most people, I'm aware of Molly as an actress. When I've obviously listened to her album now a couple of times, and she has a beautiful voice. It's a different voice, like most people, if you're used to hearing the speaking voice, when you hear the singing voice, you go, wow, that's different. What do you think it is that's special about her voice?
There's an intimacy to her voice that I love. And it's interesting because I feel like she doesn't have just one voice, because she's done Broadway and stuff. And that voice, I mean, it's the same tone, she's the same woman, but that's a different voice. It fits that style better. It has a different kind of power. And I think what she knew as a young girl as a jazz singer, and what she really honed in the studio and then live, was just how intimate it could be. I mean, there's something wonderful about being a jazz singer and having some gorgeous microphone like right here. And you can just, you hardly have to do anything, and it captures every little bit, And I think because she's very clever and talented and gets things quickly, she got that very quickly. Yeah, I think it's the intimacy, of course, the tone. She's a beautiful tone, but also and the storytelling. What she brings as an actor, like the story of a song, is very important to her. The title track of the album, Except Sometimes, I Get Along Without You very well, except sometimes. The story of that song is very meaningful to her. It would be on the Birdland record if it comes out. We have an arrangement of Don't Explain, the Billie Holiday classic, that's like very personal to her. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's what I like about her voice.
I feel like, as you just said, Peter, I think if you're a really good actor, acting is a performative discipline, as is playing music, and I think you can really imbue songs with meaning and emotion, because I guess that's something that's required in both disciplines. And as we mentioned before, and you've alluded to a couple of times, you've got some pretty serious acting credits behind you yourself, acting on Broadway, but also in shows that are genuine household names, listeners and viewers, so shows like CSI and Law and Order and this sort of thing. So I'm really interested in your perspective on, so I gave that example, but how else do you think there's some sort of cross-pollination between the skills someone who can do acting can bring to a music performance as well?
Yeah. Well, two things come to mind. First of all, what you're describing with acting and the connection with music, I think was really what was so great about Sinatra. And people who emulate him sometimes miss that. What they emulate is hey, that kind of like the croonery kind of guy, and like, luck be a lady tonight, that a certain attitude. But what was great about Sinatra was he sang every line the way you would say it if you were an actor and it was a line given to you. That's where his greatness was. Mm-hmm. And his tone, of course, but doing that on pitch and with his voice. So when he does that, what naturally happens, because you're emphasizing certain things, and, if you had a line, I really don't feel well today, you wouldn't say, I really don't feel well today. But, you would emphasize certain words, right? And when you do that, when you sing, you get this natural, it becomes a little irregular and swinging, because you're hitting sometimes on the beat and sometimes off the beat. But Sinatra's not thinking that. He's just saying that like you would say it,
Yeah.
So that's great, because if you embrace that part of Sinatra the way he did, then you're acting the song, you're telling the story of the song, and you're swinging without having to think about like, did I just hit a downbeat? Okay, let me hit an offbeat now, or like, whatever. And then the other thing I think that comes even for instrumentalists, the best solos tell a story, right? So they, if you come out blazing from the top, like, you've stated the melody and then you come out blazing, like that better be part of a story, right? Because the thing we're most used to understanding in any kind of like artistic context is, I guess like Aristotle, right? There's a beginning, a middle, and end. So beginning, there's the end of the beginning in the middle, the end of the middle, the beginning and the end, in the end, and so a solo kind of takes you through that. So if you can understand and dynamics do that too. Dynamics can really tell a story, where if you can bring something down, and dynamics are almost like the way an actor might use stillness. Like if an actor has been moving and then they're suddenly still, you in the audience go like, what is it? You know what I mean? And so if as music, if we can suddenly, pull it in and they come to us, and then, and then take them somewhere else, So yeah, I think it's, to think narratively in music is really beneficial if you can do that. Yeah.
And that probably links well, Peter. One of the masters of light and shade in music was Bill Evans. Now, you've mentioned that you've got a little screenplay sitting there that you're hoping that sees the light of day on his time with Miles Davis. Just tell us a little bit about the inspiration for that, and what made you get into that?
Yeah, so this was a marriage between my acting life and music life as a young man. So in the 90s, I got a master's degree in acting, actually, in a program down in San Diego connected with the Old Globe Theater. And that program had a thesis requirement, and it was 20 minutes by yourself on stage. And, technically, I think we could have compiled monologues or something, but everybody writes something for themselves to do. And it's a great thing because you learn all these lessons doing that. So I knew I wanted to do something with music. And I also knew I didn't want to offend people with makeup. So I started looking at white pianists and seeing what might be there, because, it's not just the music, it has to be dramatic. And like, what could I do that would make a good little 20-minute one-man show? And so what I came across, and of course I was so familiar with music, but what I came across was, Bill Evans during his time with Miles Davis is so interesting and dramatic. And so sort of the story of him coming of age as an artist under Miles's wing. So the one-man show imagined him the night before the Kind of Blue recording session. He's sort of pulling his hair out, trying to figure out what Miles expects of him. Miles has given him this assignment, okay, G minor 6, A augmented 7. What would you do with those two chords? And of course we know Bill comes back and he writes Blue and Green, and it ends up on Kind of Blue, which is the greatest selling jazz record of all time. So my one-man show, it's like he's going through those demons that we all have, not just artists, of like what's my authentic expression versus what do I think people expect me to do, and how do I get through my own inner obstacles and demons to kind of triumph and create this thing that's ultimately, the most beautiful thing on that record, arguably, So I did that. And then my sister, who knows about these things, she was like, oh yeah, that's like the climax of a third act of a screenplay. And I kind of filed that away. And then a few years later, it was 9/11 and like everything shut down. I had no work. I'm living in New York. And I thought, okay, maybe I'll give it a go, And I had interviewed all these people for the one-man show, and then I interviewed others, including his African-American live-in girlfriend at the time, Perry Cousins, who died not long after I interviewed her. So it's not good that she died, but I was very fortunate to catch her while I could, And Paul Motion, the drummer. So anyway, fast forward, I managed to get the script in the hands of an agent at William Morris. I became a William Morris client. His name is Alan Gasmer, and he's just produced the Bob Dylan biopic with Timothée Chalamet, and is producing my script. There's a French director involved named Francois Vell.
Wow.
There's,
brilliant.
We're finally, 25 years later, maybe on the brink of actually making this thing.
That's amazing. And I have to ask, Peter, I assume there's going to be, I know it's too early to say, but there better be some sort of live shit at the Village Vanguard. That's all I'll say.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's stuff at the Vanguard. Don't worry. Yeah. It's basically like 1955 to 1960.
Yeah, wow.
So, it's taking a page. There's a wonderful movie called Capote that Philip Seymour Hoffman starred.
Oh, yes.
And it focuses on the time that Capote wrote one of his greatest novels, In Cold Blood. And by focusing on that time, you get the sense of the whole life. And so similarly, there's a lot of stuff in Bill's life that's just not in my movie. But, it's like Bill's life is like 4 or 5, 6 movies. I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's by focusing on this time, I think, where you get, oh, okay, now at the end of the mile, now he's the Bill that we're all going to know. And, he's come into himself. So it really ends with this formation of the great trio with Scala Faro and Paul Motion. So.
I often feel like as an audience member, I love it when a biopic music just focuses on that certain time, a certain place, because it allows you to go so deep. And as you said, you can I think the understanding that you can draw out of that real person is much greatly enriched, rather than having like a cradle to grave thing, which is limited by time and that sort of thing. So that sounds very, very cool.
Amazing.
Yeah, well, we're excited. I'm sure you're more excited, but we're very excited to see if that comes out and sees the light of day. But it sounds like you're making great progress there, Peter.
Well, thank you. It's funny because this thing has had so many fits and starts over the years. And Alan, back when he was my agent, I mean, he's still, he's my manager, I guess, technically, but he's a producer now, that he can be a producer on the film and all of this. But when we first started working together, he said, because he worked on Ray, he said, Peter, Ray took 20 years to make. He's like, when your movie gets made, like, I might be an old man. You might be an old man too. So it takes a while, but yeah, I fingers crossed. It's actually, and I think what I'm really excited about is I just feel like it would be really good for the music.
Yeah.
Because the characters in this screenplay, the next to Bill, the next biggest character is Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Cannonball Adderley, George Russell, Paul Motions. It's all these people are going to learn about our heroes, right?
The soundtrack will be amazing, and as you say, it'll bring that music to so many, such a new audience who would be able to appreciate it, which would be cool.
Yes.
And look, and there's something to be said for delayed gratification too. So when it happens, you'll be a happy man. Yeah. I was talking before about going deep, and now I'm going to go a bit tangential. Can I go deep to the back of your studio there, and can you please tell me what is that piano that's sitting in the back?
Oh, yes. That's a 7-foot Baldwin. It's a Baldwin F.
I love it.
It's from 1970, and I love it. Yeah, sorry, there's a sheet on it. That's like my dust cover.
Tell us about the character of the piano, Peter. Well, what is it that you love about it?
It's really, well, first of all, my favorite piano, if I can get a good one, to play at venues and halls and such, is a Steinway B, the 7-foot Steinway. A really good 7-foot Steinway, I almost prefer to the 9-foot for jazz, just because a 9-foot can be so reverberant. And when you're articulating a bebop line, sometimes the note is still hanging in the air. And you're like, wait, I'm on to the next, and it's not list, it's different. So this Baldwin has that dryness and crispness, I feel like, of a Steinway B. And it's Baldwin's Steinway B. It's a 7-foot. And the action is the Renner action. So it's the same action that's in the Steinway. And the bass is really robust. It's like, you hit some of those notes in the lower octave and they're just, just go for days. It's great. And that's been a revelation too of, as a piano player, you play, like when I was on the road with Molly, for example, whatever instrument is there, that's what you're playing. And, we would send a rider asking for certain instruments, and usually the venues had them, but sometimes they didn't. And sometimes even if they did, maybe they weren't in good shape or, and trying to spend that time in sound check, like figuring out what this instrument does and can I do what I need to do. And now that I'm doing concerts and recording on my piano, it's like, oh my gosh, if I can't sound good here, I'm in trouble, because I know what this piano does,
You're all out of excuses, Peter.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, the sun was in my eyes, so that's been really great to do these concerts and actually my last record that's coming out in 2 months, we recorded here. It's a quintet record and we just did it all in one room.
I feel like you might even become less tolerant of pianos you get to use on tour now that you've had so much enjoyable time with your own one and the pleasure it's bringing you.
Right.
We ask a question of all our guests, Peter, and it relates to live performance. We'd love it if you could share a train wreck story for us.
Oh, man. Okay, so speaking of television, I was doing a gig. My good friend Ryan Cross, a bass player who's very dialed into the TV world, he said, Peter, I need you to do this thing. It's for one of the networks. I forget which one. They had done, there was a television production of Rent, the musical.
Uh-huh.
And it was like 2019, and it was very well regarded, and it was up for awards. And this is one of those things, you see these around award season in LA. It's FYC, for your consideration, So there was like a for-your consideration concert of this really amazing singer, huge Broadway talent and television actor, Brandon Victor Dixon is his name. And it was just me and him playing a song from Rent. And like, I can do the Broadway thing, and my reading is now pretty good, but it's not like playing All the Things You Are. So I have the music on an iPad and we're playing, and I've played through it, but like, I don't have it memorized, and there might've been chords. I don't think there were chords. I think it was all just notation. I think it was just reading music. And I go to turn the page on the iPad and nothing happens. And it was one of those things where it was like in the movie where it's like, whoa. It's like it just goes in like slow motion, you know what I mean? And so there's this program, you guys probably know it, it's called Fourscore. It's for reading music on the iPad. Yep. So if you tap it too much, it thinks you're trying to edit it.
You're going into edit mode.
Like that my finger is like trying to write something on the music or something. So I guess that's what I had done. And so I started frantically tapping it, and somehow I got out of that. And my left hand, because I wasn't telling it what to do, but my left hand was kind of just doing something that kept rhythm. And eventually the page turned, and Ryan was in the audience, and he knew something was going on. You know what I mean? But I don't think anybody else did, thank goodness. But that was just, it was bad.
That's an original one, Peter. I haven't heard that one before, so thank you for that. That's something different. Love it. Another traditional question we ask, Peter, is for our guests to tag another keyboard player. So is there someone out there that you admire or who have worked with that you'd love to hear more about their story?
Well, there's a jazz pianist named Sullivan Fortner. Well, I don't know. I believe I'm not sure if they're married or whatever. They're certainly together. The vocalist Cecile McLaren Savant.
Okay.
Sullivan I'm pretty sure he's a genius. Everything I hear from him, and it's funny because, it's not like I almost experience him. I really like to go to dance performances or art museums because I really don't know anything about it. You know what I mean? And I can just kind of like, oh, look at the pretty colors. I couldn't have an erudite conversation about art or dance or,
Same.
And it's funny because the way Sullivan plays, I almost have a little bit of that because it's so profound and so like, it's not really how I play. I mean, I suppose I wish I could play because he's so good, but it's just, he's like on another level.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people feel that way about him. I think people feel that way, the way they do about him, the way that a lot of people felt about Mulgrew Miller when he kind of came on in the 90s. Mulgrew had this nickname. They called him the state of the art. I don't know if do you know that idiom in Australia? Do you have that same?
State of the art, absolutely. Yeah.
And Sullivan's kind of that way too.
No, great pick. Noted well and truly. Thank you, Peter.
Yeah. If you can check it out, let me just shout out there's a video. He gets a request because he also sings. It's like a great singer. He's playing a gig in Paris and it's around Christmas time. And he has a microphone just to announce songs. So no boom stand or anything. It's just there. And someone's like, sing, sing, sing. We love the way you sing, And he does Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas, holding the microphone in his right hand and just with his left hand. And it's like, it goes through like 5 or 6 keys.
Yeah.
And it's mind blowing, So check that out if you can.
Will do. No, I love it. No, thank you for that suggestion, Peter. That's amazing. And then we have the dreaded Desert Island Discs question. So if you can, Peter, 5 albums. If you have to choose them, what would they be?
Okay, Wynton Kelly, Kelly at Midnight. Stevie Wonder, Fulfillingness, First Finale.
Nice.
Bill Evans, Trio Explorations. Miles Davis, live at Carnegie Hall, The My Funny Valentine with George Coleman and Herbie. How many am I at?
That's 4?
Yeah, I think it would have to be the Cannonball Adderley, Nancy Wilson record.
Oh, yes. Great picks. And for someone that hadn't had a chance to think about them, that's incredibly impressive. So well done.
You did very well there, Peter.
Oh, good.
Yeah. It's always hard to pick only 5, of course, when you have such a great love of music.
I could have kept going, but...
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
People usually feel bad for the ones they leave out. That's normally what happens when we do that.
Right.
So Peter, we love to include our our podcast with a series of questions we call the Quick Fire 10.
Okay.
And what that is David and I will rapid fire 10 questions at you, and we'll just ask for 10 answers back, the first thing that comes into your head as we go along. And I will start with a very tricky one, which is, what is the first album you ever heard?
Something by Bette Midler. There was a Bette Midler record that apparently as a little boy I loved, and I would just trash the record player, like picking it out and putting it on there.
As long as it's not the Beaches soundtrack, Peter, that's acceptable.
Yeah,
that's
I don't
fine.
know.
Peter, what's your most important pre-gig ritual before you play a show? What do you need to have sort of to feel settled?
I think I just try to like check in with my breath, you know, especially lately with these concerts. Like there's a lot going on beforehand because I'm also sort of the host and everybody's asking me tons of questions.
Yeah.
And then at some point I'm like, I got to play. And it, like, all right, let me just separate for a second and just, you know.
Okay, if you had not been a musician, what do you think your career choice would have been? And you're not allowed to say actor.
Well, when I was little, I always wanted to be an architect, which is funny because I have terrible visual. I can barely dress myself, but I don't know. I think I like the idea of spaces.
Yeah, sounds like the architecture profession dodged a bullet. Favorite tour you've ever done, Peter?
Oh, Australia.
There you go. You're a charmer.
Correct answer.
Yes, indeed.
What about the favourite gig you've ever done?
Wow, that's hard. Oh gosh, why is that so hard? Well, I did play at Melbourne Recital Hall with Molly,
Great,
and I
nice.
remember that piano being extra special. I think that's one of the best pianos I've ever played.
Wow.
I'm going to put the pressure on now, Peter, and you can't choose an Australian city. Favourite city you've ever played?
Can I say New York?
Yeah, absolutely.
Of course you can.
Yeah, there's nothing like New York. And also the energy that it gives you to play, you know? Something like, okay, here I am.
Very valid.
Well, allegedly, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. So that
right.
makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense.
I think there's a song about that.
Yeah, you could be right. You could be right.
Yeah.
Speaking of songs, name a song that you used to love, but now you've played it to death.
Take 5. Yeah. If I never play that again, I'll be fine.
Sorry, I'll edit this out. Obviously, no, that was great. And then we have favourite music documentary or movie, Peter?
Well, there's one on Bill that's really good. It's on Amazon. I think it's called Time Remembered. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I haven't seen that. I'll have to check it out.
Yeah.
Is that a recent one, Pat? Recent
Yeah,
release?
it's 2016 maybe.
Wow.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I'll definitely check it out.
Yeah.
All right, here's one for you. Name one thing you would like to see that would make your life as a piano player easier. Could be an invention that doesn't exist as yet, potentially.
Yeah, I mean, some kind of, I guess what we were talking about earlier, some kind of thing where you walk into a hall and you have a certain expectation from the instrument. A little more uniformity. I hesitate to say that because I don't want to take the soul out of great instruments. I don't want to dumb down the brilliant ones.
Yeah.
But if we could just make them all brilliant, that would be good.
I love it. And last but not least, Peter, your favourite non-musical activity or hobby? What keeps you sane outside of music?
Ooh, yeah. I mean, I just like moving my body, whether it's going for a little run or a hike or a walk. You know,
Brilliant.
It's really great. I do my best thinking those times.
Yeah, understood. Peter, I can't thank you enough for spending time with us. I'm really excited to see what's happening for you over the coming years as well, including the release of that amazing movie. I can't wait to see that, and obviously maybe see you down under at some stage again in the future as well.
That would be great. Yeah, I should say look out for my album, which is coming out April 11th. It's all soul jazz tunes, like things like in the style of like Lee Morgan's Cornbread or Una Mas, Stray Grooves. Features Roy McCurdy, the famous drummer, who's 87 years old, if you can believe it. Still plays great. Anyway, it's called Smitty Straightens Out.
Love it.
Smitty
we'll definitely be linking to that too.
Yeah.
Peter, that's amazing. And there we have it. Another quality guest, Paul, with a lot of interesting insights across both the music and acting spectrum.
Yeah, I really liked his thoughtfulness around the I guess, the experience of playing music and listening to it. You know, we kicked off talking about the vibe of playing everything acoustically and what that feels like and the energy that creates. And that was a theme that ran pretty consistently through the interview, I thought, David, when you think about his reaction to different pianos he's used, thinking about the work you do as an actor and what that can potentially bring to a musical performance. So I found that really fascinating.
I just want 1,000 square foot studio in a church, but that's just me, or not just me. That's what Peter's got. Yeah,
what a room! If you're listening to this, we were lucky enough to be able to see it. So for those who are watching on YouTube, but if you're listening to this on audio only, it's a very lovely, big, impressive room that he had. It looked very nice and deep, didn't it, David? There's a drum kit right at the back, and the piano was there, and yeah. I'm jealous too, very jealous.
Absolutely. So, no, a big, huge thank you to Peter and a huge thank you to you all out there for listening. Particular call out, as always, to our gold and silver supporters, Mr. Dewey Evans from the sunny land of Wales, probably not super sunny in February, but still. And then the lovely Tammy Catcher from Tammy's Musical Stew. Thank you, Tammy, for your ongoing support. The wonderful Ed at Elk Electronic, synth repair guru, particularly for those of you listening from Australia. If you need a synth repaired, Ed is the man. And last but definitely not least, Dave and the team from the musicplayer.com forums. There's been lots of great discussions on there just in the last couple of weeks, including the Viscount Legend one has quite the thread going. I can report, I know we talked briefly in the live stream, there is an overwhelming consensus that damn keyboard is brilliant. So,
yeah, it seems to be attracting a lot of attention, and I'm looking forward to maybe discussing it maybe a bit more when we have an opportunity, yes. Whether we have a guest who's using it or in future live streams. Which
if I can get a damn one into Australia, I would nearly buy one myself, but they're in short supply at the moment.
Hey, now, David, speaking of Australia, and I think this is topical because our guest Peter was very kind and referenced Australia a lot in the chat because he obviously knows we're a couple of Aussie blokes, and he's been down here and enjoyed himself, which is great. But I have to say, and you made me think of it just then when you said, hey, one of the best keyboard mechanics going around if you live in Australia. But let me tell you, listeners and viewers, and we reference this sometimes, most of our listeners are not from Australia.
That's right.
It's the United States and then the UK, isn't that right, Dave?
Yep, number one is United States, two is UK, and then I think Germany and Canada are right up there, and then Australia and New Zealand. Yep.
And how many listeners / viewers per episode are we pulling in now?
It's about 14.2 million.
Oh, wow. I thought that's grown, hasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, no, in numbers, I mean, it's a long and complicated story, but roughly on any average episode, we end up with about 12,000 listeners. So that's individuals listening around the world across both audio and video. But there are some variances in that, and I could bore people to death for hours, but that's basically it. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So where I'm going with this line of questioning, this interrogation I'm giving you here, David, is if you are based in, say, the US, where the majority of our listeners and viewers are, or the UK, and you think, you know what, I might have a dabble at being a gold sponsor or of the Keyboard Chronicles, it might be worth your while because we actually you'd be reaching an audience actually in your part of the world. And we've got plenty of loyal Australian listeners too, so we're certainly not discounting our mates down here.
No, we welcome all our sponsors, and we tend to capture them via Patreon, and basically you become a sponsor on Patreon, then you get the shout-outs on the podcast. We have a 3 or 4 time a year newsletter that goes out, sort of with a bit of keyboard news and talking about the podcast that goes out to a large audience as well. So, yeah, there are some benefits to that. So, yeah, do consider and thank you.
Yeah, we love you. So there you go. That's me touting for business, David. That's right. That okay? Can I be a bit of
No, that's fine. We've got to pay for this jet somehow.
Dirty tout. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, all good. So, no, thank you all out there for listening. We'll be back again in a couple of weeks. And in the meantime, keep on playing.